With the discussion, my name is Ulrika Nilsson. Let me reintroduce Svitlana Konochuk, Sergiy Shavro, and please make a sign or with your head nod or something when I call your name. Miroslav Dudovic, Program Officer at Civil Rights Defenders. Larissa Cherstilo, Union for Ukrainian Women in Scandinavia. Harald Edelstam, President of Harald Edelstam Foundation. Yevgeniya Averhed, or Jenny. She's working on human rights projects at Folkuniversitetet. Ove Bring, Professor Emeritus of International Law at Försvarshögskolan, or National Defense College. Annette Dahlqvist, Head of Demokratiakademin. And Shane Quinn from Folke Bernadotte Academy. Just a very short while ago, it was inconceivable that recent events would evolve like they have. Now, Crimea is annexed by Russia, and it's been at a very fast pace. I'd like to start with Ove Bring. What's your reaction to Russia's movements?
Well, of course, as an international lawyer, I'm very concerned that there have been serious violations of international law in this case. Every student in law is familiar with the key concepts that are involved: non-intervention, occupation, aggression, annexation. All of these things have happened over this period, one thing after another. It started with intervention, military and political. It went on with occupation of certain territories in the Crimea. Altogether, it was an act of aggression. And then just recently, we had annexation, an unlawful annexation of territory of a foreign sovereign state. So these are extremely serious violations of international law.
At the same time, Vladimir Putin claims to have the law on his side. What's your answer to that?
Well, he argues that if you have a referendum and the people will have their say, that would make the whole thing legal. But you see, referendums have to be established also as part of international law. It's not only a question of a certain group, it's also a question of sovereign states. So a referendum will give self-determination to a certain territory. If the state in question is in agreement with that, if you have an international agreement between the Ukraine and Russia and some other states, perhaps from the European arena, then it would be legal. But you can't have sort of a succession from a state without the agreement from that state in question.
Other states have had referendums and they have been recognized and accepted. What's the main difference here?
Well, I mean, if you take the case of Kosovo, where there was a referendum in 1991, actually, and then there was a declaration of independence in 2008. What had happened between those years was that there was a process where the United Nations was involved from 1999. And when the Kosovo Declaration of Independence was a fact, it was because it was accepted and recognized by many states in the international community. That was because the Kosovo population had been victims of violations of human rights. They had been persecuted. They were victims of human rights violations. And you cannot say that that has happened in the Crimea. The Russian population in the Crimea has not been victimized by the government in Kiev, as the Kosovar population was victimized by the government in Belgrade. And that is the big difference between those two cases.
And Russia has also promised to respect Ukrainian borders. It promised that when it signed the Budapest Memorandum in '94. How binding are agreements like this?
Well, I mean, the Budapest Agreement is only a reconfirmation of what is already clear from the United Nations Charter of 1945, that territorial borders are sacrosanct, and the only way to change borders are by agreements between states. And that was confirmed by the Budapest Agreement in 1994.
Shane Quinn, I'd like to ask you, how well do you think that events in Crimea have been documented by monitoring agencies?
This is on? Monitoring agencies, I think we work together with a lot of partners in Crimea and in the west of Ukraine as well, and actually at the moment the media flow is not really showing what's happening in Crimea. I think that if we realize what's really going on, I think it's people, today in Europe are in flight. Partners that we work with now have been forced to leave Crimea with their families and leave their elderly parents behind. You have like a complete breakdown in the rule of law. You have like the police are non-existent, and you have these self-defense units basically running the show. Monitoring agencies, I think Ukrainian NGOs haven't heard very much from them at all. It's mainly Human Rights Watch that's been documenting these abuses.
What's the problem? Why hasn't it been done?
That's a good question. I think it's been completely closed off. Crimea, nobody's allowed in and nobody's allowed out. The last I heard that people were able to leave by train, but I mean, as we saw with the OSCE mission trying to go down, they tried 3 times at 3 different border posts, and they were rebuffed entrance.
Svitlana, what would you say are the main problems with how elections were conducted in Crimea?
Во время подготовки референдума были нарушены все возможные принципы проведения честного и открытого референдума.
During the preparation of referendum, all principles of open and honest referendum were broken.
Сам референдум переносился 3
Referendum was delayed 3 times.
Сначала он был назначен на 25 мая вместе с президентскими выборами, которые должны состояться.
The first date was 25th of May, together with presidential election, which are going to happen in Ukraine.
Потом на 30 марта.
The third date was 30th of March.
И, наконец, состоялся он 16 марта.
And it happened in reality 16th of March.
Очевидно, что 2 недели, а решение было принято 27 февраля, это очень мало для того, чтобы организовать референдум и обеспечить равенство интересов в агитации.
Of course, you can understand that 2 weeks are too short time in order to show to people all the information available and make the referendum honest.
Сам вопрос о территориальной целостности страны в принципе не может решаться какой-то частью страны.
And such question as unity of the country cannot be decided by only one part of this country.
Can you give some examples of what happened on election day at the election booths?
Непосредственно во время голосования, в день голосования, было тоже масса нарушений.
In this day of referendum there were a lot of abuses and violations.
Доходило до того, что ходили организаторы референдума с урной, и на улице первые попавшиеся люди отмечали что-то в бюллетенях. И кто эти люди, это непонятно.
The first violation was, for example, that organizers of the referendum went around with these papers where you vote, and they asked people on the street to sign something, and who those people, what is their identity, nobody checked this.
Есть информация о том, что голосовали люди по российским паспортам.
We've got information there were people with Russian passports who voted in this referendum.
Приходили также целые группы людей и записывались прямо в день голосования для того, чтобы проголосовать. Хотя по процедуре должны быть списки тех, кто имеет право голосовать.
And the procedure of voting says that you need to have the list who will vote in advance. You will prepare this list in advance. But there were people who came in the day of referendum, they made this list on place.
Потенциально эти группы людей могли передвигаться с участка на участок совершенно неконтролируемо.
And this group of people could go actually from one vote place to another one and vote several times, and nobody controlled this.
Сама явка была аномальной.
The presence of people, the attendance of this referendum was very strange.
Потому что крымские татары бойкотировали референдум, и единицы из них посетили участки.
For example, Crimea Tatars, they boycotted the referendum, they never visited this referendum, and only maybe few of them voted.
И показатель голосования в 97% абсолютно нереальный, хотя бы исходя из этого фактора.
And the results, as we know, 97% is not possible in reality, only if we take into consideration of these factors, that Crimea Tatars, they didn't vote.
Наблюдатели не были допущены, независимые наблюдатели, а те, кто был, в основном представляли интересы все-таки Российской Федерации.
The other violation was that observers, independent observers, were not allowed to be there, and those who observed the process were pro-Russian, we can say it, observers.
Ну и самое важное, сама ситуация, которая предшествовала референдуму, это не свобода слова, не свобода изъявления взглядов. И голосование по принуждению под дулами автоматов напоминает нам ситуацию 1938 года.
And the situation itself in which the referendum took place, the situation, it was not a freedom of speech or expression of your thought. It was a situation when people voted under military pressure. And this situation reminds us the situation 1938.
Тогда в апреле Гитлер вошел в Австрию, а в сентябре также там был проведен референдум, согласно которому порядка 98% австрийцев согласились стать частью Великого Рейха.
What happened in 1938, it's when Hitler came to Austria in April, and in September they made similar referendum, and approximately 100%, 95 also, voted for Austria to become a part of the Third Reich.
Совершенно очевидно, что свободное волеизъявление в условиях силовой оккупации неприемлемо.
Because it's clear that the freedom of expression in the military context is not possible.
I'd like to ask you, Miroslav, and also Annette, who works from Sweden, how do you react when you hear Svitlana's description of how the election underwent?
Of course, we react with great worry about the situation in Ukraine. I was there just after, at the removal of Yanukovych, and what Ukraine has gone through since November it's been massive human rights violations, and it continues. And I remember talking to one of the human rights defenders in Kiev in the end of February, who mentioned that after Sochi, Putin will have time to deal with Ukraine, and nobody believed it then. So, I mean, it's with great worry we hear about this. And regarding human rights monitoring, it's a very difficult task, and I think the human rights defenders inside the country are really, really working. Those people we met at that time had been active since November in looking into all the different violations, trying to find the victims. They were deprived of sleep for 3 months, and now it only continues with Crimea, and who knows what will happen with the eastern Ukraine. And it's with great worry, and it's an uncertain future for the Ukrainian people, I think.
Yeah, the Academy of Democracy, we work with tools how to make democracy work for real, for the people. So I've been to Ukraine before the election, and met a lot of underground movement, the gay movement, student movements, who all talking about the corruption. And for me, the corruption in Ukraine is a real challenge now, because you need to build up a country depending on trust, because you can't make democracy for real with the people if you don't trust each other. So I'm really more interested to know about how you think, Svitlana, about that, how build up a new country with people who trust each other.
Thank you for this question. Я на 1,000,000% согласна с мнением, что коррупция – это основа проблем в нашем обществе.
Thank you for this question. Svitlana agrees 100%, 1,000,000% with you even, that corruption, this is a basic problem in the society.
Она разрушает доверие как к органам власти, так и к продуктам, которые производятся в стране.
This corruption destroys trust towards the power in the country and also the products which are developed by this power.
Мы можем приводить очень много примеров того, как другие страны отказывались сотрудничать с Украиной именно из-за коррупции.
We have plenty of examples when other countries refused to cooperate with Ukraine just because of corruption problem.
Они не доверяют документам, которые произведены в Украине.
Because they don't trust the documents which are produced in Ukraine.
Дипломы, паспорта, другие документы, которые государство выдает.
Even such things as diplomas and passports are not trusted. All these documents are produced by the government.
Ну, также всем очевидно, что коррупция создает проблемы и в развитии бизнеса, и в отношениях между людьми.
And corruption also destroys businesses, development of business, and also relationships between people.
Именно из-за коррупции становится возможным мега-состояния, которые люди получают за несколько, за 2-3 года.
Corruption makes it possible for people to get a huge fortune in 2-3 years.
И обесценивается ценность труда.
And the labor force is not valued anymore.
Обесценивается ценность образования.
Education is not valued.
И опять же, повторюсь, возникает проблема доверия как между людьми, так и к институтам власти.
And just to repeat myself, I would like to say that the trust towards government and towards institution of power is going down.
И сами институты власти происходят тоже вследствие коррупционных отношений.
And governmental institutions work according to corruption rules.
Одна из больших проблем – это подкуп избирателей в ходе выборов.
For example, you can buy candidates during the elections, buy the place for the candidates.
Поэтому противодействие коррупции сейчас это одно из главных наших направлений. И сейчас у нас есть такая инициатива, которая называется «Реанимационный пакет реформ». И антикоррупционная составляющая в ней занимает ведущее место.
At the moment we are working on this, and now we have such a very nice initiative to a package of reforms, and the reform to fight with the corruption is one of the most important elements in this package.
И мы были бы очень благодарны, если будет такой опыт, который покажет, как создавать процедуры, свободные от коррупции.
We would be very grateful if you can show experience how to make procedures which are free from corruption.
When you say you have a solution package, is it your organization you're talking about? And how will it work with the new government?
Здесь сейчас объединяют усилия и отдельные организации, и органы власти, потому что даже руководителям страны очевидно, что невозможно развиваться, имея такой шквал коррупции.
It's a unity between government and non-governmental organizations because even the government understand that in this situation we cannot develop the country.
Еще два слова скажу, почему мы надеемся, что борьба с коррупцией будет успешной.
Two more words why we hope that the corruption fight will be successed by us.
Как известно, страны Евросоюза сейчас будут оказывать и финансовую помощь Украине, и это влечет за собой контроль за теми процедурами, которые связаны с прохождением средств и их использованием.
One factor is that the European Union will help us financially, and together with financial help will come rules on how to use this money, and it will be more democratic and corruption-free procedures, we hope.
Поэтому процесс евроинтеграции мы рассматриваем как сильный фактор влияния на систему прозрачного и открытого управления у нас.
And that's why we see Euro integration just a very important factor in a transparent system of government in the country.
Sergiy, let's go back to the protests at the Majdan. You were there the whole time. Can you describe the feelings among the people? How did they change during these 80 days?
Ну, я скажу, что чувства людей в процессе демонстрации не менялись в связи с тем, что большинство людей, если не весь Майдан, был объединен одной целью, то у всех было, ну, у всех людей, которые были на Майдане, была одна цель жить в свободной демократической стране, ну и, естественно, изменить ту ситуацию в стране, которая была, на лучшее. А именно как изменений каких-то настроений или еще каких-то изменений, ну, во всяком случае, я не видел на Майдане.
I can say it like this, that feelings of people didn't change on Maidan, because all people who came there and demonstrated, they came for one idea, to live in a free country where human rights are respected, and all people thought like there is a whole period of demonstrations, so he himself didn't notice any change of this idea or any change of feelings in the process.
What about the day that people were massacred? How can you describe that day?
Ну, во-первых, я скажу, достаточно трудно говорить и вспоминать о тех днях, хотя бы с той точки зрения, что я там был и все это видел, с учетом того, что все это происходило в 21 веке, в центре Европы, в достаточно мирной стране. Это, конечно, все страшно. Вот. Но, к сожалению, сложилась такая ситуация, вот, когда те люди, которые, это очень важно, сакцентрировать на этом внимание, сознательно поднимались и шли под пули, отдавая себе отчет, что могут погибнуть. Вот. Они шли не нападать на кого-то, они шли под эти пули защищать себя и свою страну. И как раз вот в эти дни, когда погибли люди, на Майдане они продемонстрировали наибольшую солидарность, как бы концентрацию и, ну, наибольшее объединение какой-то одной идеей и целью.
To describe the feeling when people were killed, and especially when you eyewitness all this massacre, is not it's not easy, especially when all these pictures come up in your head afterwards. So Sergiy doesn't like to think about it. But just the thing that it was 21st century, center of Europe, and a country which is not usually violent, and we have not experienced violence in many years, it was very difficult to understand the situation. And what Sergiy says, that people, when they were killed this day, they showed some unity for one idea, and it was very strongly done of them this day. So it was, he is more or less proud, but he doesn't like to remember that.
But you got hurt yourself.
Да, 19 января, в первый день такого серьезного и вооруженного противостояния.
19th of January, it was the first day when it was a real military attack, and this day Sergiy was wounded.
Harald Edelstam, how important is it that people have the courage to protest and claim their civil rights?
I think it is very important indeed that actually, normally the case is that it's one courageous person that has to follow their gut feeling, their moral compass of what is happening. And if you have this strong person doing that, many other people tend to actually go along. And I think it is important to protest when you see that something is not working, when you see that human rights are violated, when you see that there is oppression of the government to the people, when there is corruption in the country. I mean, when the human rights are not followed, it is important to protest. And I think it's extremely brave and courageous of the people of Ukraine to do this. And I must say at this point I'm also I'm a bit amazed about the support they have actually received now from the international community, because in the beginning of this period it was quite a bit, it was very quiet. But this has actually changed, and that also is a sign of that it makes a difference if you have those persons, if there are some people, some communities, and most important of all, the international community who actually raise the awareness of the situation. And that goes back to the concept of responsibility to protect, that the international community has an obligation to intervene and to be part of the dialogue before a military action is actually needed.
What can Swedish organizations do?
Доброго дня, кохані українці. Ladies and gentlemen, today is 122nd day of Ukrainian movement. And we are here representing Ukrainian diaspora, following basically by minutes what's going on. And of course, we notice this information space being dirty, and that's what we should do. We should look for the truth, check our facts, and don't let the true democratic cravings to be suppressed, basically, by propaganda, for example. And I would like to bring your attention to the fact that this issue is not pure Ukrainian. We had 3 months, as you said, that it was silence, and while our criminal government was killing people in Majdan, was a lot of banks in Europe laundering money of them. And still a lot of money still in them banks in Europe. So repatriation of Ukrainian money should be the question on the table for us as well.
Are you talking about the Yanukovych regime or
exactly.
the new government?
Exactly.
Do you trust the new government, the interim government?
We should have them, give them a chance. First of all, we have learned to criticize and take them away. Now we have to give them a chance and support. And of course, there are all democratic measures to change them in case they wouldn't perform, because they are just the servants of the people, and people just realized that it is like this.
Shane, what do you think Swedish organizations should do to help from here?
I think what we're talking about, toolboxes that we can use, are like, to bring these principles of accountability and transparency down to the local level, and that's what we do at Folke Bernot as well, and that's what we were doing in Crimea as well before this occupation started, that we had, I was surprised actually how reform-minded the people we met in Crimea then, and these were not the same people that turned up at this referendum, I'm sure of it. We were very well met, on the same level as in the west of Ukraine. So it's a bit of a misnomer to say that Crimea is steeped in this kind of Soviet nostalgia. Of course it's there, but there's a lot of people who want to change in Crimea as well. And I think now is the time that we shouldn't draw back any projects or postpone any projects. It should be the opposite. It should be, I think on a European level, we've lost a lot of our self-esteem about what we can do, actually. Because
Why?
a lot of things have been happening over our heads. It's a lot of international politics.
Why have we
it's a lot of
lost
international law.
confidence?
I think maybe EU has been mainly concerned with soft power for a long time, and people. I mean, let's face it. I mean, the EU policy with the association agreement was quite botched, as one observer called it. That the EU and the US went to they brought baguettes to a knife fight because they didn't factor in the whole Putin element. It was simply ignored, and I think we're seeing the results of that as well now. So I think at FBA we're continuing our work, the Rule of Law program, and we have a very large project happening now. It's starting in May, and that's going to be all over Ukraine. Unfortunately, not Crimea because it's basically closed off. And also on FBA level, we're involved in sending OSCE observers as well, which will probably happen, 20 of them to be sent down.
Okay, you had something more to say.
This is just a simple to do, as other countries did. For example, Israel, Germany, Baltic countries, they help the injured people on Majdan. They are still suffering. There is a lot of people to help and their families. So this is something concrete, tangible, so you can do. Thank you.
About 2 days ago, I heard Carl Bildt on CNN. He said that he thinks that Putin's real goal is Kiev. Anyone who'd like to comment on that?
I would like.
Yes? Come up. You're supposed to be on the panel.
I think that's not the goal. That's quite clear. He doesn't need Kiev. He doesn't care about Kiev. The goal is the East. Because who needs Crimea without the East? Because he's trying to create a border around Russia, which is quite clear. And Kiev is not around his matter, but that's my personal opinion. And when I was sitting in Moscow airport on the way here, I can tell that the only thing that they discuss now is that we have Crimea, and everybody's like, yeah, which is obviously and clearly said to me that probably it looks like a paranoia to take the lands that former belongs to somebody, and somebody thought that he needs that land. But in response on this conversation about Kiev, my question is then, if Kiev, then for what? What he will be doing with that?
Okay, what about eastern Ukraine? How worried are people that he will advance into eastern Ukraine? Putin.
You mean how worried people?
Yeah, are people worried in the east?
Definitely, and I think that the main worry is that, first of all, nobody wants war, which is obvious, but at the second time, all the situation is at the point when the question on the table is whether you want to live on this land, then fight for it. This is the reality of the nowadays. And I know that a lot of people, I mean, even if 2 weeks ago, people were saying like, no, there will be no war, everything will be okay. Even despite the situation that happened in Kharkiv, when people were beaten and so on and so forth, it also wasn't in the news. And actually, I wonder why Kiev doesn't really take actions in east of Ukraine, because everybody knows that the main problem is in the east. because lots of the industry and businesses is connected with Russia deeply.
What type of action could they take in eastern Ukraine?
At least they should change the mayor, governor, and all the people who are at the top. But they don't do that.
How big would you say that the support for Russia is in eastern Ukraine? There are a lot of ethnic Russians living there.
I mean, could you imagine that you have a grandparent that live in Russia and you live in Ukraine? What kind of conversation you would have with your grandparent in this case? And could you imagine that somebody will speculate on that and that somebody will tell you that if you love your grandparents, you should join with them? But you say like, no. And then what happens? A big fight. So I cannot say that people on the East support the Russia, but they support their own families that live there.
Yes?
Josie, I have noticed one thing recently. Today we heard that Sergiy mentioned that it started all in Kyiv. Last week I heard from a guy from Donetsk, that Liberal Party, that said, we were there at the beginning. And I heard, of course, if you listen, people from Lviv, they said, oh, it's all starting in Western Ukraine, but that's great. Every part of Ukraine feel that they own this, they're part of this movement. So let's not think about Ukraine as a different. Ukraine is diverse, and we will use this diversity for our advantage.
Svitlana, how much would you say that Russians know about? How much do they get to know through media and things like that?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
How much do Russians know about the situation in Ukraine? Can they make up their own minds? Do they get the right information, or is it only one channel of information for Russians?
Русские получают информацию из российских средств массовой информации.
Russians get information from Russian channels of information.
Когда мы сравниваем пропагандистскую машину России с Геббельсом, то это не просто образ.
When we compare the propaganda machine of Russia with Goebbels, it's not only a comparison.
Это реальная практика, которая существует в российских СМИ, подконтрольных Кремлю.
It's a real practice which exists in Russia, which is controlled by Kreml.
Чем больше лжи, тем легче в нее будут верить.
And the principle of this, the more lies you have, the more easy it's to trust these lies, to believe in these lies.
Но, к сожалению, у этой ситуации есть очень неприятные последствия.
Unfortunately, there are very bad consequences of this situation.
Потому что дошло до того, что даже родственники не просто ругаются, а отказывают друг другу в дальнейшем общении.
And the consequence is that even relatives, not even fight with each other, they stop to communicate with each other.
И в частности, вот был такой показательный случай, когда человек 84 лет погиб на Майдане, а сын из Петербурга не приехал на его похороны, опасаясь, что его могут, не знаю, что с ним могут сделать. Ну, в общем, побоялся ехать на Украину.
One very weird case, it's when a man, 84-year-old man, was killed at Majdan. And his son from St. Petersburg, he didn't want to come to the funerals because he was afraid that he will be killed by these bandits, Ukrainian Bandera people.
Мы осознаем проблему слабости украинских СМИ.
We understand that our information is also weak in Ukraine.
Но в данное время противостоять огромному пропагандистскому натиску российских СМИ мы, конечно, не в состоянии.
But we cannot compare ourselves of this huge Russian propaganda machine. We don't have this capacity.
Поэтому новые медиа играют ведущую роль в том, чтобы доносить правду.
That's why social media is very important to show the truth.
И еще я бы хотела отметить очень важную роль социальных медиа в этой всей нашей революции.
And I would like to highlight the importance of social media in this revolution.
При их помощи стала возможной идентификация участников различных событий.
With the help of media, we can identify participants of different events and actions.
То, что раньше делалось анонимно, сейчас обрело имена и лица.
What was done anonymously before now has faces and names.
Поэтому уже стало ясно, кто участвует в каких-то ситуациях, и люди сами определяются в общении.
And now it's clear who is who through communication in all these clashes and situations.
Также многие представляют свои документы очевидцами или участниками, которых они были, и это очень важно.
And it's good that people document the events they see through videos, through pictures, and show it to other people.
No, Svetlana, I just have a question because you mentioned the impact of the social media, and I'm just wondering if you have the apprehension that Russia as well is putting a lot of weight in the social media in their campaigns. Have they been successful, or are they committed to the ordinary media such as television and radio and paper print?
Спасибо. Да, им удалось добиться того, чего они хотят, потому что очень много информации о представителях, например, Беркута, мы почерпнули именно из их социальных страничек.
Yes, Russia has used social media as well very actively, and they achieved their goals through social media as well. For example, Berkut, those snipers who shot people. Information about these guys was on Russian social media, but information was changed, yes?
Например, вот Сергей уже упоминал сегодня, что говорили, что якобы Майдан преследует евреев.
For example, one of the myths, which was very common, is that Majdan is following Jews, is hating Jews.
Но очень быстро была распространена информация со странички Беркута, которая свидетельствовала как раз о том, что именно представители силовых структур государства являются носителями вот этой антисемитской идеологии. И это получило очень широкий отклик, и даже высшие представители еврейской общины сами опровергали вот эту пропаганду со стороны России.
And Russia made a very huge propaganda about this. And this information was published on the websites and on the channels of this Berkut group. It's a military group who shot people. And even the head and leaders of Jewish community in Ukraine, they said that it's not true. This is only Russian propaganda. Even they reacted that it was a lie.
Поэтому в любом случае открытость социальных медиа играет свою позитивную роль.
Yeah, and in any case, openness of social media is very important.
И еще одну скажу, что в Москве недавно был огромный митинг протеста, и он стал результатом именно того, что люди получают правдивую информацию из социальных сетей и могут уже отказываться от информации пропагандистской, которую им навязывают со стороны власти.
For example, in Moscow last week it was a big protest when people went out to the streets to manifest no to war in Ukraine. And we can see that just thanks to this social media and all this open information, a group of people in Russia know the truth, and they had the possibility to show their disgust with all this situation which Russian authorities do, to show this through demonstrations in Moscow.
Yes.
Well, it's important to say that this propaganda, it's not even information in war, it's informational, genocide. And it's not only in Ukraine or Russia, it's here. You could see in a lot of newspapers, before it was Russian ethnic community was threatened. Then we have the titles, even in Swedish newspapers, 96% voted to join Russia. That means 4% were threatening 96%. So it's working here as well, so be critical and work on that.
Caroline?
No, I'm just listening to your story now, and also what you mentioned, Vasi, that so what we're looking at is basically that they are trying to divide even families. And so this might even be a repetition of what happened in Rwanda, where you're trying to divide whole communities, families, neighborhoods. Is that what's happening?
I'm kind of yes, and that's why I started my short talk about this awareness about social medias. I mean, yeah, there are definitely big pluses about social media that anybody can easily access to any information, but at the same time, it's a big catalyst of all these family wars, This kind of kitchen conversation, they got bad and good side. And the bad side is that people start to, I don't know, even hate each other when they sit in one room, and that's not right.
Something I've been wondering about during these last weeks is that if the support in Crimea was so strong for Russia, how come we haven't heard anything about this earlier? It's been very quiet. Anyone?
As we discussed yesterday at dinner with Svitlana, she showed very good why this happened in Crimea. As she showed you a map of an island, the southern part of Crimea is inhabited by Russian, pro-Russian military, old officers, old military, who is of course in their blood, they are devoted to Russia. And the whole other part of Crimea, northern and central, is inhabited by Ukrainians, Tatars, and mixed population of the country. And this was Ukraine who inhabited this part by force, because otherwise people want to live only in the south of the island. So there were always such. Russia always said this is our part, and there were always nagging about being a part of Ukraine of some of the population. But this is what happened now in Crimea, which gave wind under the, we can say, under the, yes, this was artificially inflamed conflict. Because of course people talk about this in Crimea, in Eastern, in Odessa, where I'm from. We can always be unhappy with the government of the reform. But this is what I want to highlight. This was artificial conflict, because I can see in social media what happened. Just for 3 weeks ago, I communicated with my relatives in Moscow, in Kaliningrad, anywhere, my friends whom I know for 15 years. We didn't discuss these things. Suddenly, my relatives start to stop being my friends on Facebook and stuff like this. So something happened. It's a hysteria which is going on internet and among people, which was inflamed artificially. So even if there were some talks about this, that's why you didn't hear about it. But it was nobody manifested it, nobody cared to manifest it before this. Russia helped.
Do you want to say something? Yes?
Well, the Academy of Democracy were a proud organization of the Swedish Forum for Human Rights. You asked about what could the civil society do in Sweden. And the civil society have done this event together. And the Swedish Forum for Human Rights is the biggest event in Europe that have been built up by the civil society. And we meet about 2,000 or 3,000 people from all over the world talking about situations that no one talks about. So I think the civil society in every part of the world can do major things to just raise the voice. And I've been Facebooking with my friends in Ukraine today, following this, and they say, God help you. You're blessed. Thank you. So we can do a lot, but I'm really interested to hear about what you're thinking about when you hear all this. What do they have to do in Ukraine to have democracy for real, do you think, and the human rights?
Well, may I say something about the reaction of the international community?
Of course.
Because in part it's a response to what you're asking for, but in part it's a response to Caroline, who said that protests are so very important. Because here it's a question of helping Ukraine economically, development assistance. That is what the international community could do. But the international community should also protest, because even if the Crimea is lost, we have to be sure that the principles of the UN Charter is not lost in the process. So you have to defend the principles very strongly with protests, because you cannot relativize the principles of the UN Charter. You have to be strong in your protests, and those protests should go hand in hand with assistance, and if possible, cooperation with Russia and the other actors in the region. It was very unfortunate in the beginning of the crisis when the German government said we should cooperate, not condemn. Actually, the Crimea was lost already in the beginning of the conflict. Everyone who saw what was happening understood that. So it was a matter of condemnation and a need for it right away. Now, after a while, condemnation and sanctions, even if they are not very effective, are in place. And that's a very good signal for the future. Even if we can't save the Crimea, we could perhaps save Eastern Ukraine, perhaps we could save Transnistria, perhaps we could send a signal.
Putin is more or less laughing over the sanctions. But is Russia immune to economic pressure?
I think they will have to pay a price. They have to pay, in the long run, a political price and an economic price. It will cost you money to take over territories and guarantee the welfare, as they see it, of new citizens and so forth.
I have a question to bring here. Because you said about Europe, and Europe needs to react, of course, and there were many demonstrations, not even in Europe, in Japan, in China, everywhere, in Australia. And what do you think about this agreement, which was signed only in half? Only political part was signed by Europe yesterday, and not economical, and this agreement cannot be split in two. How can you comment this? Why did Europe do this? And what does it mean political support for us from Europe, for Ukraine?
I think what you express is a need for more political support, stronger political support. And it's very difficult. You will get support in a principal way. You will get support in an economic assistance way, I think. You will not get support in a territorial way. It's not possible to use military force. It's not worth the price even. So what the world community could do is very limited. That has to be recognized, and it's a pity. So that's why, as an international lawyer, I say this is not only a matter of the Crimea, it's a matter of the principles with regard to territorial integrity of states.
Yeah, just on the economic question, the statistics show that Russia is very dependent on its exports, especially gas. And it exports its gas, 70% of its gas, to Europe. It doesn't have any pipelines to China or eastwards. So I think that's where you have to hit them where it hurts, basically. And nobody has even suggested that. And now it's springtime. We don't need any gas at the moment. And we have about 7 or 8 months to make those sanctions tougher, I would say.
Let us wrap up here, and I'd like to ask a last question. The OSCE is now sending observers. Finally, will there be free and fair elections in Ukraine in May? Who would like to answer that? Yes?
like, the main concern is what is the age of the people who want to be a president in our country. And that's a very big concern, because if those people were born during the USSR, I'm not sure that I can trust those people. And I don't think that somebody can answer me on that question. That's just a comment.
All right, we'll have to see, I guess. Thank you so much to the panel for taking part of this, and thank you, Caroline, for giving me the opportunity to take part of this panel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Now we're going to have a short time for questions. And our first question is from Mr. Stig Larsen.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for your intelligence, but I'm quite worried because Western people usually have very nice ideas, and when you transport them to other kind of countries, like North Africa, you see the results. It's not so nice. And we have to be self-critical. And some of you won't be so happy about what I'm going to tell you. But I have a consciousness. I don't want to have a new Yugoslavia. You know, my ex-girlfriend, Sofia Terzic, 89 to 95, made me quite conscious about the situation in Yugoslavia. And it was really unnecessary with all these killed children, all these raped women. You know, this fucking Genscher from Germany, he said Croatia is a nation before AU could say anything. France said no, but they were forced because Germany was so strong economically. And it was this fucking Genscher who was responsible for all these killed children and all these raped women. I don't want to see this again. All of you understand that this is a risky situation. And then I want you to listen to Jesus Christ in Thomas Evangelist. He said to us, be clever as snakes and be unguilty like doves. It's very, very true. You have to understand that Putin is fucking serious. And you have to understand the big difference in mentality between Russia and West. All of us is Westerners, sort of. And we like, you know, democracy. And we like freedom. But in Russia, most people, they have another kind of thinking. They are thinking upon, you know, Christianity means something for them. Family thing means something for them. And they look upon us as decadent. And that is a fact. And you have to ask yourself, is Ukraine really a country? Well, it's a lot of kind of people living there. But is it a country? I was in Kiev 2012. I was sort of reading my poetry for football fans. And they all in Kiev spoke Russian. Nobody spoke Ukrainian. And in the cities in Ukraine, people speak Russian. They don't speak. There are some young guys, nationalists, and they speak Ukrainian occasionally. And in the countryside, especially in the western part, around Lviv. They speak Ukrainian. Well, okay, well, yeah. But, I mean, it's nationalists.
Can I interrupt you? I thought it was time for asking questions for the panel and not making speeches ourselves. So please, let's those who have questions make
Yeah, I'm very, just 1:30 seconds.
En sekund till bara.
Yeah.
Avsluta det.
And my ex-wife, her parents, her grandparents, they survived Auschwitz, all 4 of them. And their relatives came from Lviv. And her parents were in Lviv.
Fråga du ställer, Stig.
Yeah.
Dämpa det lite. Kom.
And you know what happened when they came there 3 years ago? They were talking about during Soviet Union time, there were no anti-Semitism. Nowadays, they have their glasses smashed. And you are not talking about the anti-Semitism in Ukraine. So, don't play with fire. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Our next question is Mr.
My name is Ali Rashid. I'm from Cork University. I wanted to ask the Svitlana a question. It's the second time that the Ukrainian people are protesting. The first time was the Orange Revolution, and this is the second time it shows that there is very much courage in the Ukrainian people, and they are very appreciated for that. But the question I have, that the first movement, which led to a government which was as corrupted as the government before them. And now we have people from the same category of politicians who are running the show in Kiev. Except the problem with the Russians, the question is, what will be the guarantee that it will not be as corrupted as before? You were mentioning joining European Union or having some kind of a treaty with European Union, and that will help you to have more accountability. But I must make you disappointed because it's the same situation in Romania and in Bulgaria. Do you know that they are a very corrupted country and European Union is not able to make them accountable? So, do you really want to put all your trust in the relationship with European Union as a source for accountability? Or do you think that the Ukrainian people can force their politicians to be accountable and not just relying on what European Union can support?
Слышно? Я хочу сказать, что мы не пребываем в эйфории.
We are not in euphoria. This is the first reaction to your question.
Мы видим, что то правительство, которое сейчас существует, воспроизводит олигархические схемы, которые существовали до него.
And we see that the government which is sitting in power now, they have the similar oligarchic schemes and procedures which was before this government.
Мы наблюдаем перераспределение групп влияния в системе власти.
We can see that the power is only re-established, re-divided in the system of government.
Но мы не надеемся только лишь на процедуры, которые придут из Евросоюза.
And to be honest, we don't trust only and we don't rely only on the procedures which will come from the European Union.
Я прошла один раз по улице, где погибли наши люди.
Once I went through the street where our people were killed.
Меня тогда с ними.
I was not there.
Но я и многие другие понимаем ответственность перед ними и понимаем, что мы обязаны на себе тащить эту ответственность.
But me and all others who were not there, we understand that we have a huge responsibility and we need to make it to the end, this responsibility.
Отличие от ситуации, которая была в 2004 году, сейчас мы не надеемся на правительство.
The difference with the situation in 2004 is that now we don't trust in the government.
У нас есть два больших преимущества по сравнению с той ситуацией.
And we have even two big advantages compared to that situation.
Во-первых, уже выросли молодые ребята, которые не принимают этой системы как чуждой.
The first advantage is that we have a young generation who doesn't buy this old system totally and who refuse to accept these new democratic values.
Мы сейчас будем общество, будем более солидарны и более активны, потому что мы понимаем, что только от нас зависит то, как мы будем жить.
And the second is that as a civil society we need to unite us and to be active because we understood now this time that it's depending on us how it will develop and how we will live in future.
Мы видим, что мы можем.
And now we see that we can do it really.
Thank you. We have someone else who wants to add.
This question of your... This question of yours is, of course, relevant. But the difference between the Orange Revolution and the situation today, people are not hoping for some leader to take care of the country. They are hoping for themselves. And as you noticed, there was no a clear leader on Majdan. It was a highly, lost my... People were organized. It was a people consolidation that actually was leading Majdan. And 120 days, what happened during them days? We took away the criminal clan. His house is open to public. We have a new government, just 100 days. And corruption is not in the country, it's in the heads. And this is, it should disappear from there. And people are realizing what is the way to go. So I do believe. And a part of it, just pure historically, democracy is not a new phenomenon in Ukraine. So this is just to remember who we are. Thank you.
Thank you. We have to make it pretty short because we have.
Я постараюсь очень коротко добавить к тому, что сказали мои коллеги. Дело в том, что да, так получилось, что сейчас во власть пришли те люди, которые далеко не новые в политике Украины. И люди на Майдане дали им мандат, ну как бы возможность попробовать себя еще раз, но в то же время дали понять, продемонстрировали и будут это демонстрировать и дальше, и в случае необходимости готовы выйти точно так же на Майдан, в случае, если эти люди не оправдают надежды тех людей, и очень бы не хотелось об этом даже думать, чтобы те люди, которые погибли на Майдане, они погибли напрасно.
Yes, this government was elected by people who were on Majdan and they bought this mandate by their lives, of course. But the difference is that people who were on Majdan and now they understand that they can anytime go back to Majdan and force this new politician to withdraw if they don't deliver what they promised. People got this conscious at the moment, so this is very important. And he doesn't, Sergei says that he doesn't really want to think about that all those lives were lost for nothing if we will only exchange this old corruptive government by a new corruptive government.
Okay, we have another comment here.
And then we have a question over here. Mona.
Yes.
I will be very quick, just 2 sentences, but I'm pretty sure that that's important because even in my speech, I'm not sure if I highlighted that correctly, but the thing is that people should be aware about the land where they live and not about politicians, whatever. They should understand that this is the place where I want to have my house, my work, my family, and then this is my neighbors, and I want to have a relationship with them, because you cannot turn out 45 millions of people to be civil, to be active, and whatever. They still need to have some leaders that they will explain them what are the problems and what are the differences between us. People in the West, East, Center, whatever, we really have differences. Ukraine is very diverse. But we need people who believe in the country, and that's important.
Thank you. Our next question, please.
Yes, Ms. Björk.
Yeah, the answer should be short.
I only think we should address the issue, even if part of it might be Russian propaganda. It seems like a fact that we have a right-wing extremist party, Svoboda, that is part of the interim government of Ukraine, and really touch upon that issue, because yesterday I think we read in the papers that part of this extremist wing were in fact going into the state television of Ukraine and fired the chief of the state television. And reports like this, at least, is a concern for me, for many other people. So the revolution is not hijacked by these elements. So how are you going to address this issue? Well, do you think it is an issue? How are you going to address it in such a case?
Я постараюсь ответить на этот вопрос. Действительно, как-то он остался в стороне. Есть такая организация. Я сейчас не хочу говорить, хорошая она или плохая, к сожалению или не к сожалению. Да, есть такая организация в Украине, называется «Правый сектор». Это ультраправая организация. Многие ее называют фашистской, многие ее называют нацистской, многие ее называют ультранационалистической и так далее. Это такие, концентрированные бандеровцы, если так можно сказать, но, одно маленькое но. То, что они делают, хорошо это или плохо, сложно давать оценку, я не юрист, но то, что очень важно, и это правда, эта организация в Украине крайне немногочисленная. На момент, когда были противостояния на Майдане, она насчитывала 100, максимум 150 тысяч человек. В масштабе Украины 45 миллионов, это капля в море. Сейчас, к сожалению, Украина занята немножко другим вопросом, вопросом Крыма, и внутренняя политика, внутренние какие-то вопросы безопасности отошли, к сожалению, на второй план. Но я думаю, когда ситуация стабилизируется, наши правовые органы, наши суды, прокуратура и полиция даст правовую оценку действиям этих людей. Если вдруг так окажется, что где-то они там закон нарушили, поверьте, 100 человек или там 150 человек в масштабе страны никак не представляют какой-то серьезной угрозы. Хотя, действительно, такая организация есть, они присутствовали на Майдане. Но я лично не видел того, о чем про них говорят, что там прямо бегали с автоматом и всех убивали.
You're right in one thing, that there is such extreme organization now running in Kiev and in Ukraine. They're called Right Sector, and it's a far right organization. Some of people call them Nazi, fascist, or right ultranationalists. They have different labels. And this organization and their actions are very exaggerated. They speak about 150,000, but actually they are much, much fewer. And as Sergei says also, that now Ukraine is busy with something else. We have this annexing Crimea, So there is no time or power to focus on these internal conflicts going on in the country with this organization, for example. So, but when the situation will be stabilized, it will be courts, it will be according to all the rules and regulations. These people will answer if they did something bad. But this should be left to the legislative, to the court system in Ukraine. And to personally add what Sergiy said, he won't personally add that during all the protests which were on Majdan, he personally never saw right sector people running there with a rifle or with a gun and shooting people. So this is a bit exaggerated image, we can say.
Yes, we have only time for one comment. Short comment.
One phrase only he wants
Just
to add.
one phrase.
Возвращаясь к вопросу или дополняя вопрос о радикально настроенных людях в Украине во время Майдана, я просто не могу не сказать или не коснуться темы вооруженного противостояния на Майдане и вооруженного захвата власти на Майдане. Справедливости ради надо сказать, да, тогда, когда провластные структуры, снайперы, армейский спецназ, спецназ полиции применил против людей нарезное огнестрельное оружие, не гладкоствольное, не травматическое. Да, на Майдане со стороны протестующих было применено точно так же против этих сил огнестрельное оружие. Это правда. Так случилось. Глупо это отрицать. Но, во-первых, это были единичные случаи, единичные. Скажу так, лично я там не видел, во-первых, я не был там в момент этого расстрела, в непосредственном очаге, где гибли люди. Вот. Поэтому я не видел, лично я не видел вооруженных людей. Но те люди, которые там были с оружием, да, они были, но действовали не скоординированно, и там этих людей были единицы. Учитывая то, что на Майдане были тысячи людей, не сотни тысяч, тысячи людей, то вряд ли единицы людей с оружием можно называть вооруженным противостоянием.
So one comment which is very important in related to your question. Sergiy says that he will not deny that, of course, when the governmental forces, police, they started to shoot people and snipers started to shoot people, there was some military self-defense on Majdan. People shot back. But to be honest and to show the situation, really the whole picture, there was not coordinated measures, coordinated military fight back by the protesters who somebody coordinated them. It was only some cases, and actually Sergiy didn't see these cases, but he wanted to pinpoint that this right sector or anyone, nobody coordinated military shooting against, we can say, pro-governmental forces. So this is one of the myths which was born on Majdan.
Thank you. Just very short comment.
I don't know how short I can be, but
just 2 sentences.
I think one should acknowledge the fact that there are extremist groups, and one should also acknowledge the fact that they are very small in comparison to all the people at the protests. Of course, it will be a test for people of the democracy of Ukraine to see how these extremist groups, although small but now maybe firepower or trained, could react, for instance, to a pride festival held. But it's important to remember also, I mean, this is a small group which is visible and probably likable to write about. But one should acknowledge the fact that they exist. And I met with a person working with LGBT issues in Ukraine when I was there, and they were on the same side of the barricades, basically. So I think the Majdan was much bigger than this, and as he has described it, I've had the oddest bedfellows during these months, and I think that describes it quite good. But I think it's important to remember that the majority of the absolute majority of the people there were there to protect their rights, not to protect a certain politician, or not even in the beginning asking for political changes. They wanted to protect the rule of law and the rights.
Okay, if it's okay for you, I mean, we will probably need to borrow 5 more minutes of yours if we want to take another question, but you have to make it like really short.
Yeah.
Yes.
The thing that I was going to say was that even though the extremists are a few people, like they say, then it's even more cause to concern to see that they are in high government posts, such as the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of Education, Secretary of Agriculture. All these ministers' posts and more are slow the party members who
That's
is
not the right sector, it's another party.
Yeah.
well, it doesn't really matter because they're Nazis.
Ask Norwegian government.
Still they're Nazis and they are in government.
So we just, excuse me, just let him finish. Yes, please.
They are Nazis.
I want to comment this. This is important to comment
We
this.
have
You are a liar.
Okay, then
They are Nazis.
we have the answer now.
Give me an answer.
Just my answer. We have to respect each other now, and you can please make your comment very short. I'm sorry, but because of the time, we don't have any more.
It's even more cause to concern because if they are such a small minority, like they say, why do they have so much power?
Okay. So we will let.
У нас в правительстве нет экстремистов. We don't have extremists in the government. У нас в правительстве могут быть коррупционеры, но никак не экстремисты. Это во-первых. Во-вторых, нужно смотреть на политику правительства и государства в целом, а не искать какие-то там особенности у кого-то.
First of all, maybe in the government, people who are sitting, they are corrupted economists, but they are not extremists. This is the first comment. The second comment is that you should see the politics of a country as a whole picture, not try to choose one weak chain and highlight it to the sky.
Когда речь идет о правых экстремистах, имеются в виду те группы, которые находятся как раз вне власти и которые способны на какие-то крайние проявления. Но при этом нужно понимать, что люди прошли реальную войну, и эксцессы вследствие этой войны, наверное, неизбежны. Но мы уверены в том, что это очень малая доля вообще тех людей, которые были на Майдане, об этом говорил Сергей. А во-вторых, что это все будет расследовано и это будет стоп.
And finally, is that there are, of course, radical forces in Ukraine. And taking into consideration that it was a mini revolution, or it was at least civic unrest, it's not, of course, possible to have it without these extreme groups. Of course, this is a consequence of the civil unrest. But as Sergei already said, that these people who are extremists or far right, they will answer according to the law when the situation in the country will be stabilized.
Yes, thank you so much.
Excuse me, I would like to add only one small fact. I think it's important. At this moment, nearly all extreme right or neo-Nazi parties in Western Europe are supporting whom in this conflict? Vladimir Putin. Yes. You should know that.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks everybody. Now I just want to make a short conclusion, a very short one, about what we've been talking about today. As we have gathered here, and in fact, by doing so, taken a stand to show our support to the Ukrainians in their right and fight for freedom from the recent illegal activities done by Russia. Let us remember to not take our own democracy for granted, and instead use it to strengthen others' right to do it, and even though they are miles away. After all, this is what civic courage is all about, to allow ourselves feel the pain of others, and to use even the littlest thing that we can do to help lessen the other's pain. It is important to support courageous persons, something that the Edelstam Foundation dedicates its work to, aiming to inspire people to civic courage within the defense of human rights. Today we have shown an example of this by dedicating this platform to the voices of civil society of Ukraine to be heard. And please let us continue to raise awareness of this situation until we see the good change and future that Ukrainians are hoping and dreaming of. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. I will just hand over some flowers to all those very sweet people who have been participating and helping us today. And that's very short as well.
Yes.
Jag ville säga att det är överallt.